exciting, thrilling subject, but it's very, very important because I want to hammer in what they are. Number one, what are they? Who controls them? Who installs them? And then we'll take a look at some of the features of them. So let me just throw it out. What are services? If I was to corner you in the corner and say, technically, as a tech, describe to me what is a service. You would say, services are processes. Yes, they are. Services are processes. That's true. Let's talk about services. Microsoft, number one, services are simply software packages critical to the function of the operating system. Or listen carefully, I'm being very specific about my verbiage here. Critical to features, so they can be critical to the operating system. They can also be critical to features that are needed by the operating system. For example, the only reason you get a DHCP address, an IP address every morning, is because there's a DHCP service running. And the only reason that you can find anything on the internet is because you have a DNS service that allows you to go out and query a DNS server. If you didn't have those services running on your PC, trust me, you would be a miserable, very localized human being. Okay, a Windows service must conform to the interface rules and protocols of the Service Control Manager. Let's go take a look at him. I'm going to pop up Process Monitor, Process Explorer, and I want you to look at this right here. So I'm going to do Control 2, and I'm going to do... Alright, I want you to look right here. Everyone look at Services, svchost.exe. That is Service Control Manager. That is the service that runs, that controls all services. He is responsible for running, starting, getting up and running, doing everything with services. We're going to often, I like Control F. So here, you can see this is called, this is that process right there is the service that controls all the services running. Now, Mark Russinovich, when he designed Process Explorer, he said that pink, the color pink, is the color he used to identify all services running. So I want your attention. There is a pink one right underneath services.exe. So this is Control Service Manager. It runs right after this is basically the processes that you see here are really the kernel. So once the kernel is running, it launches the Service Control Manager, and then we begin to see our very first service. And it's in pink, and everything running beneath it is processes that are dependent. Look at this very much. All of these below it are dependent on this one service. Now I want you to look at something very interesting in the way that Microsoft does. When Microsoft runs a service, it runs many of them in one process. So take a look at svchost.exe, and notice as I mouse over this one process, I see background task infrastructure service running, DCOM server process launcher running, local session manager running, the power service, the plug and play service, and the system events broker. All of those are running in one process. So one thing I want you to walk away is services are interdependent, very complex modules of software. They're interdependent, very complex modules of software. Here we see one process, and in it is running 3, 4, 5 services at the same time. And any time in Process Explorer, when I'm looking at a service, it will always begin, and it will be the color pink, and it will be svchost.exe. Notice down here, here's another one. I have another service, and notice that it's got 4 services running. It's got host process, it's got Microsoft RPCSS, It's got RPC, which is Remote Procedure Call, and it's got RPC Endpoint Mapper. Now, all of those are very important services that are part of the operating system. And here's another one. Look at that one. Whoa, a ton of services running in one process. So look, here are the services themselves. You can see I've launched the services.msc snap-in, and you can see all of the services. You can see their description, and notice there's quite an extensive description. Now I want you to look under status. One thing that's very interesting about status is a lot of services are not what? They're not running. They're all set up to run, they're available to run, but a lot of them are not running. They're set to manually run based on, notice here, manually run based on a what? A trigger. So some services are run by an event, by a trigger, by something happening in the operating system, and then this service runs. So first thing I want you to look at is that there's a lot of services that are running. There is also a lot of services that are what? Not running. Listen very carefully. Whenever services run, they take up RAM and they slow your operating system down. So one thing we don't want is we don't want a lot of services that you don't need to be running. We want only the services that are needful for your operating system to be running. So Microsoft puts probably 90% of these services in your operating system. Most of these are needful, but it is a good idea to learn which ones to turn off. You don't ever use them. Only some people use them. Every time you can turn off a service, you actually give back more memory to your other operating system. You actually improve the performance of your operating system. So it's a good thing to occasionally go in and learn what services can I stop, can I not run, and actually improve the performance of my operating system. Who controls them? What are they? They are basically software packages. They're critical to the function of the operating system. They must conform to the interface rules of the Service Control Manager. In Linux, we call services what?
Daemons.
Daemons. This is going to be important for the 901, 902 because you're going to have to learn a little bit more about Linux than you do now. They are controlled by the operating system and configured by an administrator. So users do not have access to services. Only administrators have access to services. Listen very carefully. They are run by user accounts. They run under user accounts. The three most common are called system. Anyone ever heard of system? So system is the most powerful user on the operating system. System is a more powerful user than the administrator. System is the most powerful user on the operating system. In Linux, we don't call it system user, we call it who? What is it called in Linux?
Root.
It's called root.
Oh, root.
Yeah. So the most powerful user account, let me go ahead and add that, in Linux, so in Linux, we don't call it system account, we call it the root account. So if you're on Linux and you are logged on with root rights, you can do anything in Linux. If you're logged on with system, you can do anything. In fact, you can, listen to me, you can log on to a Windows operating system with system rights. It is very dangerous because you can do what?
Damage.
Anything. You can see anything, you can do anything, and that's very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. So there are times when you need to be able to log on a system. So Microsoft installs the largest portion of services. Also, if you add features, remember how you go to add remove programs, You can, when you add features, many times, if you add additional Windows features, you also add additional services. The last person to add services are third-party applications. For example, you got an HP printer. You install all of those wonderful HP software. You'll probably get a couple services. If you load Adobe Acrobat, you'll probably get some services. So if you go look at your services, let's go take a look, we can look right away and see that is not a Microsoft service. Everyone see that one? That is not Microsoft. That one is not a Microsoft service. So sometimes third-party applications will come in. In fact, if we go down here, I should see an NVIDIA. Here is, I just saw it, Dropbox. So there's a service that was loaded when you installed what?
Dropbox.
And also it looked like it installed two services. So sometimes third party, look at that one. Who is that?
Google.
That's our favorite friend, Google. So Microsoft installs about 90% of it. The other part of services are going to be installed by third party. If we'll keep rolling down here, we'll probably see, help me see if you can find another. Anyone see any other third party service? I don't see any other. Oh, there's an HP. Okay? So HP installed a service, Google, Dropbox, Adobe. Any questions?
It will be possible for applications to borrow services from other applications.
Do that again.
It will be possible for applications to borrow services that belong to other applications.
Can
Like Adobe borrow a service that it needs to be run on his once he's up.
Can he borrow one, or just instead of making a new one, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about that. One thing that's unusual about services is I talked about that they're interdependent. So let's take a look. I'm going to look at this service called Computer Browser, and I'm going to open it up, and I want you to notice this column that says dependency. Everyone see that? Notice what it says. This is very, very interesting. It says that the Computer Browser service depends on the following system components. So if I go and turn off server service or workstation service, this service will not run. Now look, there's also another one down here, another dialog box. It says the following system components are dependent on the computer browser service. So there's software that are interdependent. Let's go take a look at server service. I'm going to scroll down here to server service, which we have talked in depth about. I'm going to launch server service as soon as I find it. And I'm going to go to Windows Audio. Let's take a look. Let's look at dependencies. Now, I see it requires these two services to be running in order for it to run. That's very important, because if you're troubleshooting a service failure, many times it's not that service at all. It's a dependent service. So this is very important. I'm going to go look at TCP/IP, look at dependencies. I'm looking for one down here that I can show you. Task scheduler, let's go take a look at that one. None of these dependencies.
What about the workstation service?
Yeah, everything I'm looking at does not have a dependence. There we go. All right, so the fax needs to have the printer spooler service running or it won't work. The printer spooler service is dependent on these two. Does that make sense?
The printers aren't working?
All right, so let's look at
why are
it.
the printers down there, though?
This is a printer spooler service, yes? We're looking at this service depends on what two services? Those two.
Yeah.
Now look, the printer spooler, if it's not working, the fax service will not work.
Only the fax? Like,
Only the
printers?
fax. You say, why is that? Because the fax software depends on the printer spooler. what I'm trying to do is show you that services are software modules that are very interdependent, okay? Very interdependent. Now I want to show you one other thing. As you can look, there is logon. In other words, we can run this software with either network service, system account. We can even create our own users to run services. So it is not unusual, listen very carefully. When you install an application, many times the application will ask you first to create a user account because they want the user account to run the service.
Is that again?
It
So
is
you would
not
have to-
unusual, listen carefully. You say, Mr. V, I've never done a software package that asked me to create a user account. That's because you have never installed server software. When you start installing server software, they're going to say, Kirsten, hold on. First, create a user account. You're going to create a user account, and that's the account that's going to run that software. So if you run SQL or any kind of database, they're going to ask you to create a user account first, and then that's the account that's going to run the service. Look at recovery. What if the service fails? Look at the power of this. The first failure, if the service fails, we're going to do what?
Restart it.
We're going to restart. The second failure, we're going to what?
Restart it.
We can restart, but look what we can do. We can take no action. We can run a script or a batch file. We can even restart the computer. Wow, that's serious. So if you, for example, listen to me carefully. If I install a web browser, a web server, and the web server locks up,
And it starts restarting your computer.
I can set it to say, okay, try to restart the web server. If that fails, then restart the server. Because if I've got a commercial website up, I've got to have that website online all the time. So I can actually build in a set of steps to say, if my web service locks up, restart it. If that doesn't work, restart the whole computer. That's powerful. What software do you have that has that kind of ability? So this is very, very powerful. You can reset fail counts. You can restart service after so many minutes. You can create actions for stops with errors. You can run a program when it stops. You can do all kinds of powerful things. You say, well, Mr. V, why do I care about this? Look at me. One day you're not going to be dealing with desktops. You're going to be dealing with what? And you better know this. No, we don't really care about this on a desktop. But it becomes very, very important as we deal with server software. If you've got critical applications, you need to know this. So services are very, very powerful, and you have abilities to do things with them that you don't have to do with normal software. We have logon, we have recovery options, and we also have a dependency box that allows us to see what that service software is dependent on. All right, so what about troubleshooting? We've got a number of tools that help us troubleshoot. So I'm going to pull up Task Manager. Let's take a look at Task Manager. If you'll notice, on Task Manager you have a tab called what? So I can see all the process IDs of all the services that are running. I can see which ones are running, which ones are not. I can also right mouse click, stop, restart, open service, search online, go to details. So Task Manager is a nice little tool if I need to do some work with services. And I can see what's going on with my services. Let's look at another one. This is Resource Monitor. Notice in Resource Monitor, when I click on the CPU tab, I have a whole section dedicated to what? Services. And I can see which ones are running, what their process ID, what group they're assigned to. I can see their CPU usage. So I can immediately start troubleshooting just my services. Now listen, you're all spoiled because you're used to PC services working all the time. You don't ever have to worry about services, but hear me carefully. There's going to be a day that you're going to be doing servers. And you're going to be done with a cruddy, nasty third-party application that is critical to your Salesforce, and it's driving you nuts. And you're going to be in here troubleshooting services, trust me. So right now, your nice 95% of Microsoft services are well-designed, well-made. They work really well day after day. You never have to worry about services. But the day is coming, and I want to hear that phone call. Mr. V, I had a horrible Friday. I fought this stupid third-party application on my server all day long, spent all weekend here at the... I'm going to hear those tales. Am I going to feel sorry for you?
No.
No, I'm not. I'm going to say, that's what I trained you for. So services are important. You need to know them. Windows features can add more services, so be very careful about adding features. They can add more services. The server service, the server snap-in can show you all your services. Remember that Server Control Manager is the service that runs all services. It's easily seen in Process Explorer. Task Manager, if you look at Task Manager, it's found under Windows Processes. If you slide up Task Manager, you'll find all your services under Windows Processes. If you go to Resource Monitor, you use the CPU tab and you've got all your services easily found and accessible. Now, you got a command line tool. Yes, command line. Yes, I love command line. In case you have forgotten this dark, ugly place, okay, let me remind you, svchost.exe allows you to look down here, start, pause, stop, configure
Wait.
any service. I'm going to send you these notes.
Thanks.
So any service you can start, stop, query, look at. So svchost.exe is your command line tool for handling the wonderful, exciting services that you have on your PC. So what are they? They're important pieces of software. Who controls them? Basically the operating system, administrators, who installs them. Third-party applications and Microsoft are the major players that install them.